Welcome to ACC Nation. I'm Jim Quist. That's Will Ogenin. And we've got a special guest with us from Cardiac Hill, the editor, talking about everything Pittsburgh. This is Mike Wilson. Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Good to have you.
Good to be here.
We thought we'd start out a little lower key, actually, when we're on air, as opposed to the way that we initially greeted you, talking about other things and getting a little pumped up. Let's talk a little bit about Pitt football. We always talk about, and specifically, I will say I do this. I refer to Pitt as being kind of a roller coaster. And for the last couple of years, I felt like I've been going like up and down, up and down, up and down. And I'm not really sure what I'm going to get from week to week. That's no different this year. So what's going on so far? I mean, let's start from week one and bring us right up to the last game with New Hampshire. And then we'll get into the Georgia Tech game, which is coming up.
All right. Yeah. So I wish I could say it was surprising, but I mean, it got off to a pretty common start, a matchup with UMass and a decisive victory there. After that, big matchup with Tennessee in week two, which, that's pretty nerve wracking for a lot of the Pitt fan base. You go down to Tennessee for the first time in quite some time. Pitt was 2-0 there, I believe. And there was some hope. I believe they were the favorite going into that. So, there was a little bit of confidence, but a lot of concern, and they ended up eking out a victory there. And then things took a turn. After that was Western Michigan, and you would think probably a fairly easy victory. I mean, Pat Narduzzi had a 3-0 record against the MAC going into that one, and instead it turned out to be an upset for Western Michigan. So that was obviously a huge concern. And after that, record-breaking win over New Hampshire, 77-7. So it seems like they got things back on track, but I mean, you take it with a grain of salt. It's also an FCS team. So the real test is next week when this coming week when they open up ACC play.
Right. And that looks like it's going to be, and I know everybody has been downplaying Georgia Tech for a couple of years with good reason. They're rebuilding, but it seems like they're finally starting to click here. So this may be a decent challenge. Not that the Tennessee game wasn't, because I thought Pitt really did well in that game, and I know a lot of people downplayed it, but that was a tough battle. And I'm still scratching my head. And we can see what you did to your house after the Western Michigan, as Will had pointed out before the program. But Georgia Tech, I think, is going to be a challenge for the team in a lot of different ways. Pitt's going in, I think, as a favorite. But here's the thing that Georgia Tech has going for them: home field advantage. So it kind of evens things out just a little bit. Your thoughts on what we're going to see with this Pitt Georgia Tech game?
I think home field advantage may be a little overstated in this game. For the last three games that have been between Pat Narduzzi and Jeff Collins, Pitt and Georgia Tech, Pitt is 3-0. The last two were at Atlanta. So it doesn't seem like it's helped them out before. And the gap has actually widened in terms of the deficit there. Pitt beat them by 5 the first time when it was at Pitt, 10 the next time, 14 last year. It was 34-20 at the end of the season. So home field advantage, I can't see that being a huge factor in this one. It doesn't seem like it has been in the past, but I think it is going to be a very different game than we've seen in the last couple of years, because the last 2 years, Pitt's had a very concerning offense and arguably an elite defense, at least in terms of their pass rush. So that was a huge advantage going into that game. This year.
Go ahead. Keep going. I'm sorry.
This year, it's all about the offense. Kenny Pickett is just reached a whole new level in his career. Meanwhile, the defense has obviously looked a little bit shaky against Tennessee and obviously Western Michigan. So how they actually hold up against elite competition, or at least, Power 5 competition, is the big question going into this one. So far hasn't been, exactly great, or at least on par with what they've done in the past, but they've been able to make up for that with the play of Kenny Pickett and the Pitt offense. So I could see this ending up closer to like a shootout or something along those lines, given the way that Georgia Tech has played against UNC and Kennesaw State. Of course, we're basing that on, those two pretty disparate opponents there. But yeah, I think it's going to be a different thing than we've seen in the past.
One quick question before I let Will take over. Are these two guys going to shake hands at the end of the game? You laying any odds on this at all? Will they or won't they?
Yeah, that is the big question, isn't it? Given the way things went last time, I would be surprised. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, Mike. So in the grand scheme, just looking at just the ACC itself, and I'm not saying necessarily Kenny Pickett is player of the year at this point, although you can make that argument. Is there a player? I don't think there's a more valuable player to his team than Pickett is at the moment. Would you agree with that?
I think you could definitely make that argument. It's hard to think of one off the top of my head. Thus far he has 15 touchdowns through the air, 2 on the ground, only 1 interception. And for him, that's a quantum leap forward from what he's done in the past. 2 years ago, it took him 13 games to get 13 touchdowns. He threw 9 picks, replicated those numbers last year in 9 games. So 9 picks in 9 games is obviously concerning. Seems like he's really gotten that under control. He's really taken a step forward in his game personally. And it's, obviously Pitt has been the benefactor of that.
Definitely. And obviously, if you're going to be a good quarterback, you need to have a really good receiver as well. And Jordan Addison continues to just, be a gem of a recruit for Narduzzi and his staffs. Just feels like he's on an all ACC level trajectory. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Believe he's at 8 touchdowns through 4 games so far. So, that is, just incredible for a Pitt receiver, given the way things have gone in the last couple of years. And on top of him, you've got the tight ends. That's really been a huge factor this year, because last year Lucas Kroll was injured. He was out for the season, or at least most of the season. And you really saw how that affected Pitt, because they weren't able to, link together drives and just get downfield. So, with Gavin Bartholomew, he's been another big surprise for Pitt, a freshman tight end who has just kind of stepped in and immediately taken to the role. Lucas Kroll, he's already he's contributing basically as they expected him to. So for once, Kenny Pickett actually has some options. Jordan Addison obviously is top of that list. But with him not being the only one, it's not like their opponents are locking him down every single week and just taking that option off the table.
So once again, the running game hasn't been quite to the level of what it has been in recent years. But I wanted to ask you about one specific running back, Israel Abanikanda, and I'm hoping I pronounced his last name correctly. But he's come in, he's made some nice plays. But I think one of the things that kind of goes unnoticed, he's actually been pretty good in the passing game as well.
Absolutely, and that was a big factor against New Hampshire. So there was Rodney Hammond, who actually hit 100 yards for Pitt on the ground and got 3 touchdowns. That was, a big storyline there. ACC Rookie of the Week. But more quietly, Israel Abanikanda, he topped 100 yards from scrimmage, and half of those, I believe, were on passes. So, he's actually been quite productive, in multiple ways for Pitt, and that's probably going to be a big factor considering the way Mark Whipple runs this offense.
So I was reading something a little earlier today in USA Today that was comparing Kenny Pickett to Dan Marino. I'm thinking, boy, there's some big shoes right there. And then we started getting into the stats, and I'm thinking, well, let's projecting a little bit. So I just wanted to see what your impression was, if you had read that story, and what your thoughts were on comparing Pickett to Marino.
Well, I haven't read that particular story or heard that comparison, but there have been a lot of generous comparisons lately, and obviously he's earned a lot of them. I don't know if he's earned a comparison to Dan Marino necessarily, but he's definitely on an upward trajectory. The one I heard was in terms of his draft stock, he was compared to Mac Jones. I don't know if I even agree with that. I mean, obviously, he had a big year and his draft stock rose, but I mean, he's also the quarterback of Alabama, a little bit more high profile. So in terms of that, I'm not sure I agree with that either. But yeah, I mean, he definitely could. I mean, we're in September. That's the big thing here. If he continues to play at this level through October, November, then I think some of these are warranted maybe. We'll see. But I mean, the issue isn't, beating UMass, New Hampshire, putting up big numbers against Western Michigan. The issue is, I mean, how do you play against Clemson, Virginia Tech, Miami, and North Carolina down the line? And I mean, he's proven in the past that he can do that, and that he may actually warrant such comparisons, or at least maybe watered down versions of them at the very least. But yeah, like I mean, he's beaten Miami in the past. He's had big wins over Virginia Tech. So yeah, I mean, we will see. I think this might be the first year where he has a major hand in those victories, because I mean, in the past when Pitt beat Virginia Tech, it was about the running game. And Pitt didn't exactly light Miami up in his big debut. He got a running touchdown in that one. This year I could see him being a bigger factor.
So I just also noticed that the a lineman has decided to opt out of his commitment to Pitt. Big impacts, or is this somebody that will be able to be replaced fairly easily?
Well, that kind of depends on their plans. They have already gotten commitments from others on the line. There's Isaiah Montgomery, who was a big target for them that they brought in, and Ryan Baer, a guy from the Cleveland area in Ohio who's a 4-star. I think he's going to be a bigger factor, someone who could probably contribute a lot sooner than Bradley Mann could have. So probably in the long run, not that big of a deal. I mean, there are a lot of offensive linemen Pitt has brought in. And it seems at this point that there's kind of a line to, actually get involved in the game in that position group. There's like Matt Gonsalves, who another 4-star recruit there, who was expected to kind of, I guess, take on a larger role this year. And that didn't really pan out because there are more senior players ahead of him. So ultimately, I don't think that's going to be a huge deal. And there may actually be more promising players already in the class.
Let's go back to when Pat Narduzzi first came, and then go over the years and weigh it all out. Has he been building a program that is slowly but surely moving in the right direction, or has he hit a plateau?
I would say it's more like he's taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Previously, his claim to fame was the defense. For the last 2 years, it's been all about the Pitt pass rush. Pitt's one of the leaders in the nation in sacks and tackles for losses. Nobody wants to face that defense. This year, that's less the case. I mean, there are good pieces like Habakkuk Baldonado. He's already got 3.5 sacks and 5 tackles for losses on the season. That's pretty impressive. Phil Campbell stepped up. He has 3 sacks. But the pass rush, the defense as a whole, I mean, obviously, if you're giving up that many points, 40-plus points to Western Michigan, you have some issues to sort out. So there's that. And somehow the offense has taken a quantum leap forward. Kenny Pickett has improved substantially, so that's obviously helped in that endeavor. It seems like the running game is probably benefiting a little bit from that. We'll see. But it looks like it's going to be all offense this year, which is a step forward. But the defense seems to have taken a not major necessarily, but at least a step back from last year. And we'll see how they develop over the year. But it does seem like an uneven effort. It doesn't seem like it's necessarily steady progress.
You mentioned it. I think Pitt's now tied for 5th in the nation in sacks with as a team. And considering that they lost a couple quality players to the NFL, are you surprised with how well they've still been able to get to the quarterback with those losses?
Not necessarily. I actually thought they would. Well, this is about on par with what I thought they would do. I thought that the continuity was there with guys like Deslin Alexander and Habakkuk Baldonado. Both of them started as underclassmen because I believe Rashad Weaver was out. That gave Baldonado the opportunity. And I forget exactly how Alexander got into the starting lineup, but both have actually, gained experience earlier in their careers. I expected a lot from both of them. So I guess what was more surprising is that, the defense as a whole has, not really been able to stop teams like Western Michigan, and that, the Tennessee game was, a little more productive for Tennessee than I expected. But I mean, obviously that was evened out by Pitt's production on offense. So there's that. But yeah, in terms of the defense, I expected good things. But yeah, it's been kind of an interesting ride thus far.
Well, yeah, you mentioned it, and that was one of my takeaways from the Tennessee game is they let their receivers get open. The Tennessee receivers get open quite a bit, but their quarterback Joe Milton was not exactly a bastion of accuracy. So, and obviously it kind of beat him in the Western Michigan game. Is this something that can be fixed, or is this going to be par for the course this season?
I mean, that remains to be seen, I guess. But I think it has a lot to do with the fact that they lost Paris Ford and Damar Hamlin in their defensive backfield. I thought that Damari Mathis, him being back, was going to be a big boost for Pitt, and it was against New Hampshire. Got that pick six. But I mean, it's been a little uneven. It's hard to tell exactly which direction they're going to go from here. But the way they were leaving guys open downfield there, I mean, if not for some overthrows by Joe Milton, I mean, that could have gone a very different direction. So I think it is a big concern going forward.
So let's take a look as kind of the rest of the season landscape and pertains to Pitt's chances at winning the Coastal here. Obviously, we talked about the Georgia Tech game coming up. They also have Virginia Tech on the road and Clemson at home. But the reality is this division is way more wide open than anybody expected with the way UNC has been slow out of the gate, and Miami hasn't been as good. Has your expectations for this team changed since the season started?
I'm not sure that my expectations have changed. I think that I expected Pitt to kind of ride its defense this year more than its offense. That's the main thing that's changed. It seems like they at least have one thing they can hang their hat on, though, so that's positive. And I mean, considering that their defense failed them on occasion last season, maybe this might be a better way for them to go. But I feel like they're not necessarily, competing for an ACC title. I mean, that's not exactly controversial. Clemson is a little more down than they were. UNC isn't as good as expected. So there's that going on. So there is, there are opportunities for Pitt moving forward, and especially with the way Kenny Pickett's playing, maybe they can contend for more than expected initially. But it really depends on how they navigate the ACC schedule.
Talk to us about the recruiting game. How's Narduzzi doing on that front?
Well, there have been some concerns, especially locally. Tyrese Fearbury was Pitt's top recruit, defensive end out of Perry here in the Pittsburgh area. And initially he committed to Penn State. Then they seemed to recruit over him. And shortly after, unsurprisingly, he decommitted. And Pitt was kind of thought to be the team that was going to step in and pick him up. I mean, that was always kind of the buzz there. And then he ended up at Kentucky recently. So that's a concern. It also seems like a lot of local recruits are trending more towards Penn State than Pitt, especially the ones that have been, high on Pitt's list. So in terms of recruiting, it seems like there are some concerns, but I mean, and obviously with Bradley Mann decommitting recently, let's see, there was Jacavion Nonar, another Florida offensive lineman who decommitted. Yeah, there have definitely been more hiccups than expected this time around.
So, Mike, what do you think turns the corner on that aspect of the game for the Panthers?
I think they just got to win. The thing is, they've not really been consistent. They haven't really proven that they're a big winner. They're a long way removed from, big seasons like 2016 where they beat Clemson and Penn State. Things have really changed. I feel like they don't really have something to hang their hat on anymore. And while they used to kind of be defensive, well, I mean, they do have their defense. There is that. And that reputation. And they do have some local recruits from the last two classes coming in. And I think the defense should pick up and probably look more like it did over the last 2 years than it has in these last 4 games. But that's going to, hinge on the development of guys like Elliott Donald, Nakai Johnson, Deion Hayes, how far they come along and how quickly that happens. I think if people start, recruits start seeing these guys, these local guys stepping up and playing a big part in the defense, maybe some more will be attracted to Pitt and want to play a part in their success. But and then there's the offense, which Pitt has struggled to recruit offensively. It seems like, they've gotten lucky with guys like Jordan Addison and eventually Kenny Pickett worked out, but that took some time. And behind them, it's behind Kenny Pickett. It's a little uncertain what the future holds for the quarterback position. So that's another question mark moving forward.
Let's talk about the fan base for just a second. And I almost want to get a little bit into the weeds here with the recruiting, but I'm going to resist. Let's talk about the fan base. It's got to be tough maintaining a fan base in a city that is pro sports oriented. And I know that's a challenge. Has that been an issue over the years with the program, putting rear ends in the seat?
Somewhat, yeah. I don't think it is as large a problem as it's presented to be because they play in Heinz Field, and that's a stadium that seats about 68,000. And Pitt is not a school with that kind of volume of a fan base or that large a fan base. They're going to fill that out every week, especially, against non-conference opponents like UMass and New Hampshire, That said, I would say that getting, 30 to 40,000 there on a fairly frequent basis, especially for bigger games, that's not that much of a problem. You start to see it pick up around ACC, when they wade into their ACC schedule. But yeah, I would say that Pitt has never really been a school with a huge fan base. I mean, it's not like Penn State where it attracts a student body from, all over the state. So by nature, it does tend to be smaller, but its fan base has been, I would say, extremely loyal. I mean, the ones who care about Pitt, I mean, they're in it for the long haul. So I don't see a huge fluctuation from season to season. I haven't seen a huge drop off or anything. But yeah, I mean, in terms of comparing it to like Penn State, other schools, larger schools in the region, yeah, I mean, they're not packing in like 100,000 per game or anything along those lines.
Let's talk real quickly about, Pitt coming into the ACC. And I know it's been several years and there's all kinds of adjustments and mindset changes. How do you think the fan base overall has wrapped their arms around being in the ACC and what that means?
I think everybody in the Pitt fan base generally recognized that it was a necessary move financially. I don't think that anyone has really latched onto the ACC in terms of its identity and Pitt's fit in the ACC. And personally, I've always thought that Pitt would have been a better fit in the American. I know that would have been disastrous financially compared to, how they fared in the ACC, and especially the way things are shaking out with the current conference realignment and all that. So, yeah. But in terms of identity, Pitt was more of a basketball school going back. It seemed like, I mean, you got Duke, you got North Carolina and all that in terms of basketball, but it just seems like Pitt hasn't really been able to keep up especially in basketball. In terms of football, it's offered opportunities. They play Miami, they play Florida State, Clemson on occasion. So big games there. And yeah, Pitt's actually taken advantage of a couple of those. They beat Florida State last year. They've knocked off Clemson once, maybe never again. We'll see. But they also knocked off Miami in Kenny Pickett's big debut there. So yeah. There have been some big games, but in terms of like Pitt's fit, it's always seemed kind of like the northern teams in the ACC have kind of been the odd men out. Syracuse, Boston College, Pitt. If there's a bump in the road, they're the ones who are going to hit it. So it's not something that's universally beloved, but I think it's kind of recognized as necessary.
Well, we embrace you, man. We embrace you. That's why we like to touch base with you and some of the other folks in the northern tier, because there's a lot of stuff going on up there. It's exciting sports. And just real quickly, because we're going to stray from football for just a second. Basketball, how's that look for this season?
It's kind of a mess, I would say. Pitt obviously lost some pieces since last season. Five players left the program, and they brought in a lot of JUCO guys, many promising. Yeah. But you got Nike Sabande, you've got Femi Odukale, a backcourt there that, has some promise and was really looking to kind of pick up towards the end of last season. But I mean, it's not a familiar team. You're definitely kind of curious about how things are going to shake out, how they're going to mesh together. It's kind of another adventure going into this season at Pitt.
Well, we'll see. And hopefully we'll get you back and talk a little bit about basketball when we get into it. One last thing I want to throw by you. I know that you have, I'm going to say recently, that's sort of a broader term, taking on the responsibility of editor, and congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
And how's it going?
It's going all right. A lot busier than it used to be, but yeah, it's been a fun challenge so far.
That's good. That's good. Hey, Mike, thank you for coming and joining us and talking about Pitt football, and look forward to talking to you about other sports as well. Make sure you check out Cardiac Hill. That's it's actually under something else on your on Twitter. It's what is that?
Pitt Panther blog.
There we go. I wanted to say Panther something blog, and for some reason it just totally eluded me. That's an age thing, dude. So, Mike, thank you. Appreciate you joining.
Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Want more ACC sports news and interviews? Make ACCNation.net your homepage or follow us on Google News. Be sure to subscribe to ACC Nation on your favorite podcast or streaming radio platform. While you're there, we'd appreciate a rating and your support through PayPal. Follow us on social media at ACC Nation. And you'll find Will on Twitter at Will's World MN, and I'm at ACC The Q. Until next time, cheers.
Score.